So a question I get asked a lot is, how do I get back to 100% after I've got a little bit of discomfort when I'm throwing, when I'm doing split squats, when I'm running, whatever it is. And I've noticed that there's often a gap between what physical therapy leaves an athlete at and 100% speed gameplay. So I'm going to try and illustrate that gap and what the steps are to getting back to gameplay at 100%. Okay, so first step, we're in pain. So we're in pain at rest. Next, we have range of motion, strength, followed by endurance, speed, and then skill is last. So each step in this progression is rate limited by the step prior to it. Some of the steps can be developed concurrently, and they often are, but generally you're not going to go from being in pain at rest all the way to speed and skill. Okay, so once the athlete is generally out of pain at rest, we can start exploring range of motion. So say an athlete has an adductor injury. This is a common one that I've seen in baseball players because they do so much rotating and hip extension. So first we want to make sure that they have good hip flexion. That could be with like a single leg raise or a standing toe touch. Make sure they have good hip extension, couch stretch, things like that, and then good hip internal and external rotation. Then we're going to take a look at their strength. Once they've attained the range of motion that we want, some activities like a Cossack squat are in between range of motion and strength. Once we get to strength, then we're going to start challenging the tissue a little bit more. So split squats, glute ham raises, things like that, where we're getting that adductor to contract and we're challenging them with their hip extension. Okay, next we have endurance. So we're gonna do longer time under tension, something like a Sorensen hold or a hip thrust hold where they're holding themselves in that extended hip position. And then we get into speed activities, things like sprinting, and the final step would be skill, which would be like a hard 90 to first base. So there's inevitably going to be discomfort as an athlete navigates this sequence back to 100%. What we want to avoid is regression. And we define regression with most soft tissue injuries as soreness lasting longer than 3 days. So often an athlete, especially as they're gaining range of motion and strength back, there's going to be discomfort because that tissue could be scar tissue. That tissue could be lengthening back to its functional length, the length that it needs to be in order to perform the movements that the athlete needs to do. So there's almost inevitably going to be discomfort along this continuum. That doesn't mean that you've regressed. Really, with soft tissues, we only consider it regression if every time you do the activity it's getting worse and worse. That would be an indicator of regression, or if you're sore for more than 3 days after you do that activity. So this progression can be applied to shoulder injuries, elbow injuries, at really any type of injury where soft tissue is compromised or is uncomfortable. So I hope that's helpful and helps you get your athletes back to 100%.